Hope you're watching on the Salem News Channel, listening across the United States. And this opening segment is going to be really designed for my friends listening on Carol AM 870, AM 590, 1170 in San Diego, all the California stations. And I want the rest of the country to understand I'm going to get to the hostage deal that has been approved by Israel's Security Cabinet after the break with Aviv Retigor. I'm going to talk about the breaking news that CNN has lost the defamation case in Florida, with a jury awarding $5 million in pain and suffering damages to the plaintiff, and a punitive damage award as yet to be unveiled. Now, the rule of thumb for Supreme Court is that more than 10 to 1, and you're into due process areas. So up to $50 million wouldn't surprise me. So CNN is joining others who've learned there are limits to the protection of the First Amendment. I've always known them. You cannot recklessly disregard the truth or knowingly lie. And we will find out about this as the story unfolds. But I got to begin with L.A. The devastation is so immense, and the temptation to turn away is so strong that a lot of the national media has moved on. I'm out here. I live in California. We have evacuees with us. And I wanted to add to what I began yesterday's show with, which is over at my YouTube channel. If you go back and you'll find my initial assessment, there are perhaps now 4 competent communicators in Los Angeles, and I don't know how many competent officials. I said yesterday, Nathan Hochman, who's the new DA, doing a great job. Sheriff Luna, doing a great job. I want to add LA Supervisor Catherine Barger. She's been doing a great job. She represents kind of the uncovered part of the fire, the unincorporated areas in Silmar and Altadena. Altadena, by the way, I learned yesterday from LA folk, is where black people went when they were redlined out of Pasadena. It's a historically black community, not majority black anymore. It might have been for a long time. They lost 4,700 structures in Altadena. Not many people are covering Altadena outside of L.A. And then, of course, the West Side. I had a friend call me today and tell me that among the Malibu homes and mansions, there were also 158 trailers in a trailer park burned to the ground. So, I mean, there are places of immense devastation. There are also places that are untouched and are perfectly safe. I went up the Implacable Hill today, and it's a 5-mile trip for me. It's cool, it's damp, and it's going to stay that way until Monday or Tuesday, probably Wednesday, before Santa Ana's. There is no reason for people, for example, in Mandeville Canyon, not to be allowed to return to their homes. Now, those homes don't have electricity, and they don't have water. But people want to go home and get stuff, and then go back to where they've gone to. I doubt anyone's going to bring a sleeping bag and sleep there, but there is no reason. So Tracy Park is going on my good list now. She's the only city council person I know of in Los Angeles who's actually answering questions. Not all of them, but some of them. One of the questions she answered is yesterday, you can go back if you're in this community and that community, but you won't have any power or electricity. Know that. If you're in Mountain View and east of Kettler or something like that, go back, go home. But you haven't got water and power, and I don't know when it's coming back. Clear, concise, direct. I don't know why some areas that are virtually untouched by the fires can be visited, if not actually reoccupied, and others can't. I do understand there's some new terms floating around. We got a lot of jargon. Off gas. Ever heard of off gas before? It's just hazmat, bad vapors. You don't want to be in the completely devastated areas, even if your home was spared, because a battery might explode, a lithium battery might explode. There are some good reasons to keep some very relatively small areas that have been burned to the ground off limits to the public. We don't want you sifting through the rubble. I understand what the government is doing, but the government is also yielding to its authoritarian impulse to overrate. It's COVID all over again on a very small scale to the west side of Los Angeles, where people with power are just throwing it around. I heard a fire official last night say, oh, well, the off-gas problem, we're bringing in specialists who've got, super magic wands from Harry Potter. He didn't use that term. who will detect gases, and we've done half of the house's inspection. It's all gobbledygook. Never heard the term off gas in my life until this week. And it just means, there's stuff in there that are hazardous materials. Don't use jargon. Hazardous materials may have burned to the ground, may be a release. But in the meantime, LA, wake up. Let people go back to the houses that did not burn down if they are not near one of the most damaged areas in the Palisades and Malibu. But let people go back to their thousands of evacuees. By the way, the impact of that, talked to another friend this morning, Angelino. $3,000 a month for a two-bedroom apartment minimum in LA right now. Now, why is that? A lot of people don't have any idea when they're going to. It's not price gouging, by the way, it's the market. They have no idea when they're going to go home. Because the city of LA officials are just so freaking incompetent. They're not saying a month. They're not saying 2 weeks for the water, a week for the electricity. They say at least a week. That's not really a lot of guidance, better than nothing. Tracy Park is doing the right thing. You folks, you go home. No water, no power. You figure it out, but get your stuff and fly away, drive away, which is really what people would do if they could. They'd go get all their stuff and they could leave. They go to family in, New Jersey. They could get out of here for a couple of months while the cleanup continues and the water and the power get restored. I understand the cutoff. I really do. I have no objection to that. But for the 4,700 structures that were destroyed in Altadena and the Sylmar, that's in the Eaton fire, and everywhere else, there are two categories. Those you can't go near and those that you can't. And the LA city officials are being very slow to say which are the latter. They're going to hurry up because it's absolutely beautiful. There is zero fire risk today, zero. And in neighborhoods, there are 3,000 firefighters, God bless them, 3,000 ready to go. Finally, they're late to the game, but they're here. And there's a lot of second guessing. One story is, I got to check stories because there's a lot of misinformation on the web. I got to call and check it about LA Fire making certain decisions. I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback firemen. My grandpops, A.T., Smokey, was a fireman in Ashtabula for 50 years. And Chief Roll was a towering figure in my life, and he worked hard. Saved a lot of lives, saved a lot of structure. I'm not going to second guess the chief and where resources went and when they got there. I am going to second guess DWP. I am going to second guess the competence of the city council, which is nil. The mayor is obviously, she's so in over her head. Should have drowned yesterday. She's so far in over her head. We haven't seen much of her. Gavin Newsom, I want you, if you listen to one thing this weekend, listen to yesterday's Ruthless podcast. The Ruthless Variety Program. Ruthless Podcast. Go find it on YouTube, like and subscribe. They are technically superb campaign operatives, and they're also very funny. And they explain just how deeply wrong it is for Gavin Newsom to raise money through his campaign website or for the Pod Bros to do it through Podcast for America. They're harvesting data in the middle. What I did, I told you, go to Catholic Charities. Go Google Catholic Charities of Los Angeles if you want to make a contribution. Catholic Charities of Los Angeles, pretty good. I don't want you to come through HughHewitt.com. I don't want to put up a link. I don't want to charge. Processing fees are fine, by the way. I'm not mad at the Pod Bros. The Ruthless guys were very fair and technical and explain what is going on by these left-wing groups in the middle of a disaster. And they've left it up to you to decide whether it's knowing looting of data or simple stupidity. They've explained it. I didn't know anything about this, by the way. When you get an email from a donation list, it costs about $1.10 to rent that or sell it. Didn't know that. Did not know that. Moreover, at Gavin's site, they're saying you want updates from the governor's, office. It's so extraordinary. Their question of the day is Gavin Newsom's career over? I think so, because he's not making any effort to talk to people other than on Pod Save America and NBC. Safe places. Probably going to be over on MSNBC like Joe Biden was with Larry O'Donnell last night. I'm here to tell you, I'm going to go to Haviv Rettig yet because we got to talk about the hostage deal. I got a lot. Ben Domenech, Matt Continetti, Dr. Larry Arnn, the Hillsdale Dialogue comes up in hour 3 today. We'll talk about the fires. But LA, wake up. Let people go home. Don't make your terrible mistakes worse by going full authoritarian back to COVID days. Don't do that. At this hour, Israel's full cabinet is assessing the hostage deal. It has been approved by the Security Cabinet and almost certainly will be approved by the full cabinet. The terms of it are all published at the Times of Israel, and I'm pleased to welcome Times of Israel senior analyst Haviv Rettig to the program. Haviv, thank you for joining me this morning. I didn't think I'd get you today, but after I listened to Amanda and you talk yesterday, I realized you're in the States, and I appreciate your taking time to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me, Hugh. It's good to be here.
Well, I'll talk to Michael Oren, but Michael is of my generation about this deal, and I want to talk to a younger Israeli like you about this deal on a personal level. Not since the Allies liberated the camps 80 years ago this year are we going to see hostages in this bad a condition. I expect it will be pretty bad. Are you prepared for that? Do you think Israel is prepared for this emotionally?
I hope very much that Hamas, we know they understand that the hostages were their absolute greatest asset, the one piece of leverage they have over us, much more than all the opinion of all the world. And I hope that that protected them. We know that a great many were mistreated to a significant extent. We know that quite a few were summarily executed by either the Hamas fighters holding them or just enterprising Palestinian civilians who happened to have grabbed them as trophies and hauled them into Gaza under cover of the Hamas raid. So I'm not expecting to meet happy, healthy people, but I'm not optimistic. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that they're in better shape than we expect.
Now, Haviv, this is a personal question before I zoom out to the Israeli. What do you, Haviv Rettig, think of this deal? Not what does the Likud think and not does what the left wing. Don't report, feel, and emote. What do you think about it?
Number 29 on the list of 33 who are going to be released in phase 1 over the next 42 days is the husband of a woman whose sister is a good friend of my wife's. People can work through that chain. But that's an awfully few degrees. And
Yep.
My wife has helped their family and been involved and been deeply, deeply invested emotionally. And they're specific people I know and think about involved. A very, very good family friend was killed fighting in Gaza to try and rescue hostages. And so what do I think? Phase 1 has no costs for Israel and the tremendous benefit, except costs that our idiot enemies think are very significant, wins, the PR stunts, the screaming in the streets, the partying. We have enemies that have been celebrating their victories for 80 years while constantly collapsing and imploding and destroying their own societies, even as we flourish. So I welcome their partying. It is a sign that they are not getting any healthier and better as a society and that they will continue to collapse. But there are no costs that we actually care about, which, in other words, the Israeli army is still on Philadelphia. Hamas cannot meaningfully rearm or resupply, and we're going to get our people out. We, on October 7, failed them, and we failed ourselves, and we failed what it means to be Israeli. And we are going to pay whatever cost we have to pay to pay them back for that betrayal.
So, Haviv, that sounds to me like you applaud at least phase 1. Do you expect there to be a phase 2? Because Hamas has proven itself to be a terrorist organization that lies and changes its mind.
I'll tell you my reading. Very curious things have been happening over the last couple of days. We have heard from the incoming National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and we have heard from Peter Hegseth, nominee for Defense Secretary, and we've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu in multiple statements that he's released to the press, mostly in response to right-wing criticism in Israel, that we will get back to destroying Hamas. And what that tells me is that phase 2 is unlikely to happen. But not only is phase 2 unlikely to happen, you ask the personal question. We begin negotiating phase 2 on day 16 of phase 1. In other words, Hamas wants part of the deal that Hamas demanded and got was that we conditioned the launch of phase two. We conditioned the finishing of phase one on the full negotiation of phase two. And so I am actually in terrible fear. I'm fairly convinced phase two isn't going to happen. The Israeli army is not going to redeploy out of Rafah and Philadelphia and of the Egypt border, in other words. And Hamas is not going to be allowed to retake Gaza. And I am therefore afraid for the second half, essentially, of phase two. The second half of phase one itself. So I am extremely optimistic that the first 15, maybe the first 20 are coming out. I'm already afraid for the last group of phase one, never mind phase two. I don't think we're moving beyond it. And by the way, if we do move beyond it, it'll mean something significant. It'll mean that the Israelis have pocketed some kind of a dramatic win that makes Hamas's return into Gaza not the political and strategic mistake that it otherwise would be. For
Well,
example, we have yeah.
I would recommend everyone listen to your conversation with Amanda Dan Borschel yesterday. I know you genuinely feel sorrow for the people of Gaza because Hamas is still there and they're going to suffer more than anyone can imagine. And the emotion was in your voice. I can tell. I've been doing this for a long time. Do you think the Gazans feel the same way that are not in Hamas?
Yes. We have, talking about Palestinian public opinion is complicated. They're complicated. They are people stuck in some complicated political culture and a complicated religious culture. Most Gazans believe Hamas ruined their lives. Most Gazans also are proud of Hamas for carrying out October 7. And it has a lot to do with the sort of most common religious ideology in Gaza, which isn't just Islam. There's Islam in Indonesia too. It's a whole different religion, basically. It's a particular branch of Islam that says that, I'm just going to cut to the chase and be impolite about it. I apologize. We burn everything to the ground in order to clear the way for a grand reawakening and resurgence and restoration of Islam and its conquering ethos of taking over the world. That's the Hamas vision of Islam. Again, there's a lot of other Islams, but that's the Hamas vision, and it is a story of dignity to which many Palestinians in Gaza cling. Even in we will poll them and ask them, "Did Hamas ruin your lives?" They will say yes, and then we will ask them, "And are you proud of Hamas?" And the same people will say yes. So, what do I think Palestinians think? They hate Hamas. They think they're in a trap. They don't think Hamas is going to bring them out of that trap. They don't think there's any victory ahead. They also can't imagine any other political solution. They can't imagine any other future, and Hamas gives them the dignity of once in a while seeing Jews in pain. So it is a broken culture. It is a culture that is genuinely illiberal and anti-modern and oppressive to its own minorities and to women. And they don't want this war. They absolutely don't want this war. But they also are going to allow Hamas to retake Gaza and rule them and launch a new war.
Haviv the Impossible, in 4 minutes, tell me what Israel thinks and what worldwide Jewry should think.
70% of Israelis want Netanyahu to sign on the dotted line. Every poll we have says roughly the same thing. Not everybody wants the same deal. In other words, some of that 70% want the first phase, but they don't want the second phase where Israel withdraws from Gaza and Hamas retakes Gaza. So the first phase, 70% want it. 23% don't want it because they're afraid they won't be able to stop the second phase. So that's the divide between Israelis. Huge, overwhelming majority want this deal, including, by the way, 51% of Likud voters, of Netanyahu's own voters. So we're very, very, in that sense, Netanyahu is on very firm ground. That doesn't mean that they'll be unwilling to go to war. That doesn't mean that they'll be unwilling to go to larger war with Iran. That doesn't mean that the Israeli public has given up and thinks that our enemies can just, rebuild themselves on our borders. They have not. But getting those hostages out is fundamental. What do I think world Jewry needs to know and needs to think? It is okay to hold absolutely contradictory views all at once, especially when the fundamental things are at stake. We get our people out. We get our people out at any cost. And it is absolutely correct to be enraged that the cost is giving Hamas this tactical victory at this moment. and still we get our people out, because all the dancing and all the celebrations of all our enemies aren't worth a drop of our blood. And so we owe them. We owe them to get them out. And by the way, every Hamas guy who came out of every humanitarian zone tent encampment and suddenly donned a uniform he'd had hidden away under some blanket for 15 months is now being tracked by the Israeli intelligence, and a lot of facial recognition software is being applied to Palestinian Gazan social media. May they all come out and may they all celebrate and have great joy. One of the reasons for the gaps between the Israeli war in Hezbollah, which was so successful and so astonishingly competent, and intelligence infiltration was so great, and the Israeli war in Hamas, where we knew nothing and saw nothing and couldn't find hostages for 16 months, was that we genuinely had ignored Hamas for 10 years and genuinely didn't believe that they were a threat. Well, that's over. And so let them come out. Let us rebuild intelligence. Let us do all the things that we know how to do, and resume a war in a much more successful and serious way. So nothing is over, and 33 people might be coming out, and that's the bottom line, and we should celebrate it.
Haviv, I appreciate the time today. I look forward to a longer conversation after it unfolds, and I appreciate all the efforts you've done on all the different platforms to educate people, and I'm recommending it to the audience. Go to Times of Israel. Go to find the discussion yesterday between Amanda, Dan Borschel, and Haviv. It's really remarkable. Thank you, Haviv.
Thank you, Hugh.
There's a lot of breaking news in Southern California. I've already updated you. CNN is facing an enormous punitive damage judgment after they lost a $5 million judgment to an individual that was defamed by CNN. That's breaking. Of course, Joe Biden's flailing around. But I want to focus on the deal in Israel first. Matt Continetti joins me. Matt is a columnist for the Washington Free Beacon, a contributing columnist to Commentary Magazine. He's often on the podcast, though he's been MIA a little bit this week. I don't know what's going on there. But Mr. Continetti, welcome. It's good to talk to you in the afternoon at a civilized hour. You're not up, and you probably actually had a chance to think about things. I just had on Haviv Ratigor, and I asked Haviv 3 questions. How did he personally feel about the deal? How does Israel feel about the deal? And what should worldwide Jewry think about the deal? Can you run through those 3 for me?
Well, I think the answer in all 3 may be the same, just judging by the coverage, Hugh. And in my view, this deal is very risky for Israel. It's extremely risky, but one also understands the desire for the hostage families to see some of their family members returned. It's another tragedy of this deal that we don't know whether they'll be returned dead or alive. But we also understand that it might be a necessary deal, and if played right, it could lead to a safer world and a safer Israel. The question is, will we be able to play this deal right? And that I just don't know the answer to.
Haviv does not believe that second phase will arrive. He's worried about the second phase of the first phase because he has a friend in the second phase of the first phase whose name is on the list. Do you think we'll get to the second phase or even the second phase of the first phase?
There's really no telling, Hugh. I mean, look, when you're in a position where you have to deal with psychopathic terrorists like Hamas, there's no telling what will come next. I will say a few things. One, the Palestinian propaganda machine is a sight to behold. You go from proclaiming that a genocide is taking place in Gaza to suddenly saying that Hamas won the war overnight. I mean, I've never seen such message discipline except in history with the Comintern, with the International Communist Party line. So you don't know how Hamas is going to pursue this deal. I would say at the same time, what we do know is that because of decisions Prime Minister Netanyahu made beginning last summer over the objections in many cases of the American government, the entire strategic picture of the Middle East has changed in a way that could ultimately favor Israel. And so for me, the question that I think about when I look at this deal is, will Israel and the United States be able to capitalize on it in order to further that strategic vision, a strategic vision which ultimately means that Iran is denied the capacity to build a nuclear weapon and that the Iranian regime, that behind all of this terror in the world, collapses under its own weight. That, to me, is the
I think it's
objective.
fair to say, Matt, that the strategic situation for Israel, despite the horrific cost of 10/7 and the suffering of the hostages, 15 months after the slaughter and the massacre, is enormously improved, almost impossible to believe improved. Hezbollah is crippled, if not forever banished. Lebanon is righting itself. The Assad regime is gone. Hamas is destroyed, and the Philadelphia corridor is there. They will starve to death for weapons over time. What do you think of the strategic situation after 15 months?
Well, I think that strategic picture you just outlined, Hugh, is why Prime Minister Netanyahu could listen to President Trump and President Trump's advisors and say, this is a moment where Israel could negotiate through the Qataris with Hamas in order to bring some of the Israeli hostages, the American Israeli hostages, home. And you're absolutely right, whether it is Hezbollah, whether it is Syria, whether it is the Iranian defense system, whether it is the organized military structure of Hamas, all of these things have been defeated, weakened, destroyed in a way that helps not only Israel, but all of Western civilization. And I would just say that when you see these photos and videos of Palestinians in Gaza celebrating the deal as a victory for Hamas, just remember, there's propaganda at work. And what you won't see is all of the immense damage that has been done to Hamas. I keep thinking about the ceasefire in the 2006 Lebanon war, where again, Nasrallah and Hezbollah treated that as a victory, when in fact, despite being a pretty complicated military campaign, Israel really weakened Hezbollah. I think the same has happened with Hamas in Gaza.
I think it's even greater than that. Interesting parallel. Don't go anywhere, Matt. I'm going to talk with Matt Continetti during the break. Follow him on X at Continetti. We're going to talk about Joe Biden's farewell address during the break. It'll be on the podcast and the Hugh Hewitt YouTube channel. And then he'll be back after the break to talk about what's happening next in D.C. I'm back now with Matt Continetti of Commentary Magazine, of the podcast, the Free Beacon columnist. Matt, I didn't watch Joe Biden's farewell address. I kind of feel bad for him. The flailing around, the attempt to be significant, the tears, the bitterness of Dr. Jill Biden's conversation with the Post, the insipidity, is that a word, insipidity, of what I read. What do you make of this flailing?
I've never seen such a sorry end to a presidency in all the years I've been covering politics, and even before I was covering politics, just as a sentient human being. And I think it speaks to the fact that Biden is clearly the worst president of my lifetime. I'm 43 years old. There hasn't been anything like it. And you look at these moves, these attempts to make a legacy for himself, to take credit for actions others took, to pretend that this ceasefire deal in the Middle East is somehow him behind it, when in fact everyone recognizes that it was Donald Trump who made the difference here. When you look at the commutations, the pardon of Hunter Biden, this kind of ChatGPT rhetoric about the emerging tech industrial complex just won't last. I think the country is ready to move behind Biden, move beyond Biden, leave him behind. And why is that? It's because, as Gallup showed you in a recent survey, measure after measure of American life, American people think that Biden made things worse. There's no way you can get out from under a legacy of that decrepitude.
You know, the bookends of his administration are the Afghan debacle and the debacle in California that I am living through. We have evacuees living with us, so I'm kind of up to date on everything going on here. That's it. It's just been a debacle, an absolute, complete debacle. And yet he wanted to run again, and so did Dr. Jill Biden. And no one really came out publicly. I guess Nancy Pelosi forced him out. Is that a correct conclusion?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Pelosi wants to take credit for forcing him out. Today's paper has Schumer taking credit for forcing him out. It's an interesting sign of the times, isn't it, when the Democrats are scrambling over each other to take credit for forcing Biden from the race. And of course, the logic behind forcing Biden from the race, that he would lose the election to Trump, well, Harris ended up losing the election to Trump too. So you really had the undynamic duo in Biden and Harris. And they've left the Democratic Party, Hugh, in a shambles.
Oh my goodness! All
You
the
know,
assassins, the political equivalent of Cassius Brutus and the gang outside the forum that got Caesar, they have left. They have left the Democratic Party in the state that the Roman Republic was after that. I want to cover three things, Matt, before we run out of time in the next two segments: the fires, the hearings, and the hope. First of all, I think it's the worst domestic disaster since 9/11. 27 people are dead. More people died in Maui. But the scale of the devastation is so enormous that people can't see all this. What do you make of the competence of California state and local officials?
well, I think that the competence at the political echelon has been atrocious. And I think that you have many instances at the lower echelon, the actual firefighters, the actual public servants who are on the front lines, of heroism and people who are doing their job. But the real test, Hugh, it seems to me, is at the policy level. And has the California government prepared for this disaster? And once the disaster began, have they shown themselves, the governor, the mayor, to be on top of this situation, to be in charge? And I think clearly that's not the case. And it's been a systemic failure of the California political machine.
You know, Matt, I've been telling you, I lived here from 1989 to 2016, and I come back every other year to teach. And I'm telling people now, can you imagine if we had the big one, what this group of people would do if we actually had the big one? Because I've been through two pretty significant earthquakes, and Pete Wilson got the 10 reopened in 9 months. But I really don't know what this gang would do if they actually had a devastating San Francisco earthquake. What do you think would happen?
I really don't know. But I do know that ideology doesn't help you. DEI doesn't help you in a disaster of that scale. Equity doesn't help you. Climate hysteria gets you nowhere because you have to deal with on the ground practical realities. And I think that the progressive ideology that governs California is a flight from reality. It's an interest in abstractions, in virtue signaling, in feeling good about ourselves, how morally superior we are, rather than confronting the realities of the ground. The reality of California is that this beautiful landscape, this amazing climate, carries some real dangers with it. And you have to be on top of them in order to limit the damage when something like this occurs. And that's just not where we have been in California for some time. And it's given us this awful disaster playing out in Los Angeles.
Now let me move to the hearings. Two categories. The CNN loss of a defamation verdict, $5 million in suffering. The punitive damages hadn't come in yet. And the hearings on the Hill, Hegseth, Bondi. I mean, the superstar was Doug Burgum, but those two also crushed it. Let's do the CNN judgment first. How significant is that to the media?
I think it's another huge blow to the media. Hugh, you and I have been talking now for months about how the legacy media is going the way of the dodo. And here we have another stain on CNN's reputation of being found liable in this suit. And I don't think that they can recover at this point. You know, how many times are we going to have work through this where clearly the mainstream media organizations are rushing to stories that fit a preconceived narrative, and they've been doing so without any penalty for many, many years. But now, again, reality is starting to catch up with them. So I think it's a massive decision, and I hope that it accelerates a transition to alternative forms of media where people can say their mind, they can report the facts. And, you know, something like X, say, in the midst of the disaster in Los Angeles has been a way of getting all the facts. Now, some things aren't true, but you do your own checking. The point is you have a vast number of sources rather than relying on these media monsters that so often don't tell the truth.
If you curate your own feed, you will know what's going on if you're careful
Right.
about the curation of your own feed. So, Matt, let's go to the hearings of the nominees. I thought Hegseth and Bondi were great, but Doug Burgum was I mean, they're all very good. Ratcliffe was good too. What did you make?
I think they've all been great, Hugh. I thought Besson was fantastic. I think the markets really like our incoming Treasury Secretary. I think he seems on top of his game. Pam Bondi was another standout.
Oh, she killed Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff might
Yeah,
quit.
yeah.
I think his body's behind the dais up there.
Missing in action. Yeah, I mean, I followed her from a distance for many years, but I've never really seen her up close, and what a performance she gave. So she was great. Hegseth emerged unscathed. He's sharp. He's telegenic. He has a mission. He understands his purpose in this new task. Rubio was very good, of course, fluent in everything. I think these hearings have been a full spectrum hit for the incoming Trump administration. And I also think it's a sign of how discombobulated the Democrats are, Hugh. I mean, they really are not landing a single punch. And so this is a great way, I think, for Trump to begin his second term.
He's showing off talent. He's got a talent rich. It's sort of like the NFL draft. We've drafted all these people, and they're pretty good athletes. Let's hope they can work together as a team. On the podcast this morning, someone mentioned Chris Wright. I didn't see his hearing. The new Secretary of Energy, or the about to become Secretary of the Energy. We have two new senators, all right? Ashley Moody in Florida, John Hulsted in Ohio. What do you make of those two? We got about a minute to the break, Matt, and then I want to talk about your hope, your best case scenario for the Trump second term. What about those two new senators?
Sure. Two new senators, I think, are good. They're coming out of the political systems of the respective states. So they're not necessarily the preferred MAGA candidates, but I think they all have MAGA sensibilities, and I think they fit into Trump's Republican Party pretty well. Sets us up for, of course, potential primaries in the coming year to have the permanent replacements for the two
I
senators
mispronounced
from
John.
Florida.
It's John Husted. He's very conservative. I have interviewed Ashley Moody on stage and over the air. She's very conservative. I mean, if there's no room for these two, I don't know what they're good senator picks. Very good senator picks.
They look like senators, don't they? I mean, they
Yeah,
come
they
from
do.
central casting, as our president might say.
And maybe he just asked Ron DeSantis and Mike DeWine to send him a couple of those. Matt, what's your best case scenario for the second term of President Trump?
Best case scenario is that we enter the golden age that Donald Trump is promising us. He uses his power wisely. He understands that so much of his legacy will depend on numbers, jobs figures, GDP growth, rising incomes, border crossings falling, crime falling, number of conflicts in the world. There's so many active conflicts in the world, Hugh. Trump is a peacemaker. He has a job to reduce them. Of course, the two biggest in the Middle East and in Ukraine, deterring China, preventing the outbreak of World War III in the next 4 years. The best case scenario has Trump achieving all these things. I think he understands the scope of the challenges he faces. I think he also understands that he needs to get a lot done in this first year in order to set in motion downstream effects that will benefit this country. And so it's a question of, can this Republican Party that now has, or will have on Monday, a trifecta in Washington, can it work together as a coalition that produces the legislation that will have long-lasting effects as the Trump administration pursues its executive agenda to make this country freer and more prosperous and safer?
I think my own opinion is with Susie Wiles as chief of staff, the White House will run well. With Mike Waltz as the national security advisor, everyone will get their say. And with Marco Rubio as our tribune to the world, we are in good shape. Those three, we got 1 minute. What do you make of those three?
No, that's the triumvirate, right? Secretary of State, Chief of Staff, National Security Advisor. We have to look at how impressive they've done their job so far. Obviously, Rubio had his hearing and knocked it out of the park there. But look at Waltz and Susie Wiles. These are insiders. They're in the White House, in the West Wing. Waltz worked very well, it seems to me, while they pursued this agreement in the Middle East. And Wiles, they call her the Ice Maiden. She seems to have completely revolutionized the way that people around Donald Trump operate in order to maximize his purchase and power in
I agree,
Washington.
Matt.
And
I think it's a great shot. Continetti on X. Thank you, Matt Continetti. Talk to you next week.
thanks you.
AmericanFederal.com, great sponsor of the program, Nick Grovich. Will sell you gold. He will buy your gold. Had an interesting email from an old friend yesterday. Does Nick do coin collections? I want to lose, dispose of, not lose, but get a fair price for my wife's grandfather's coin collection. I said, yes. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Now, they have to make money. So there's a commission when you sell. And when you buy, they have to make money, so there's a commission. But I bought gold from Nick this month. And it's very fair. It's very reasonable. And I do that in January of every year. A lot of people do it every month, or they do it every quarter. A lot of people like gold. Congressman John Campbell, who's on with me often, is he's not a gold bug. I mean, he's not all in gold, but he just believes in diversification. Gold this morning at this afternoon, $2,740. So, I mean, it's gone up since I bought it. From Nick. And if you want good service, stellar service, give him a call, 1-800-221-7694, or visit AmericanFederal.com. As I said, I bought gold from Nick this month. You should too. If you're buying gold, use Nick Grovich and American Federal. Generalissimo, you got a weekend ahead of you. I hope Dwayne's World drops, but you are also the spokesperson for myphdweightloss.com, 864-644-1900. That's
864-644-1900.
Now, I have been reading and reading and reading. More and more people are going to the old school way of losing weight after doing the Ozempic. And I got nothing against Ozempic, but people can't afford it. No. They're going back to the old-fashioned way, and they should go to myphdweightloss.com. Why?
Why? Because the program is catered to each individual, and it is a program where you have some accountability. Every bump you hit in the road, and there will be bumps, you have somebody to talk to be able to kind of work through those hurdles. And then once you hit your target weight, how to stay there.
That's it. 864-644-1900.
644.
Dwayne lost 50 pounds and kept it off for 2.5 years out on the left coast, where I am for the semester. I'm teaching con law, First and 14th Amendment, in my 27th year of doing that or something like that. I am in the Relief Factor studio because they are a great sponsor. If you were listening last hour, I took it last hour. I don't take it every hour. I have the bag up every hour. And I do because I went up the Implacable Hill today. Beautiful day in Southern California. Beautiful day. Humidity's up to about 70%. Temperature this morning was 50 when I went up the Implacable Hill, 5 miles back and forth. And there's no reason that people who are removed from the very devastated reach, for example, Mandeville Canyon, should be reopened to homeowners. There's no water, there's no electricity, but there's no threat of fire. And homeowners ought to be able to go to their homes to get what they need for an extended stay with friends, family. They need to go get stuff. And if our house guests, who are Mandeville Canyon people, Tracy Park, if you let them in, I will go up with him and we'll clean out the refrigerator before all the food spoils and destroys the refrigerator. We'll just throw it out. It's already spoiled. But you leave food in a refrigerator long enough, you'll increase the damage claims. You'll just make it harder for everyone to live. So I'm prepared for some unusual activity this weekend if the L.A. city officials grow a brain like Tracy Park did, when she announced that 10,000 people out of the 100,000 get to go back to their homes. Because there's no risk, and they're inventing risk left, right, and... Well, if I end up emptying refrigerators and freezers tomorrow and carrying stuff, I'll be glad I had my relief factor. Because it's unusual lifting, and it's unusual this and unusual that. That's the kind of thing that causes the aches and pains that Relief Factor is designed to deal with. The minor aches and pains come with exercise and unusual activity, as well as age, and you can't avoid it. You might as well deal with it. Deal with it with Relief Factor. It works. I've been taking it for 10 years. Call them. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. Or go to their website, which is pretty easy to remember. ReliefFactor.com. Look for the starter pack, $19.95. ReliefFactor.com. Ben Domenech has made the same mistake a lot of us have, which is he's not aware, he's forgotten the time change. Okay, so that's okay. It'll take a while for everyone to figure it out. I would like, however, for all of you who are listening for the first time, if you have a comment on the show this week, I'm taking any calls this week. We're so news heavy. 1-800-520-1234. 1-800-520-1234. In the meantime, I would like you to listen to the opening of Stephen Colbert's Late Show last night. It's so stupid. Cut number 10.
This is our last show of the Biden administration. Yeah, it's been a good run. Yeah. It's been a good run, Joe. Thank you. Thank you for all your efforts. The next time you all see me, Donald Trump will be president, and you may not see me. Next 4 years, we're taking this one day at a time. That's the kind of
stupid rhetoric that Donald Trump and the country rejected. That's why Colbert's ratings are. I like Stephen Colbert. Was on his show back in the days when it was funny, long time ago. But it's a sad thing that's happened to him. David Axelrod, CNN contributor, and wait, it's not the pundit consultant. This is the David Axelrod, lead attorney for CNN. Here's what he had to say after the verdict, but before the punitive death. So this is the pain and suffering verdict, $5 million. After the verdict, David Axelrod, not the pundit, the lawyer, didn't know there were two of them, talking about the case. Cut number 11.
You heard General Young, plaintiff's expert, testify, and he kind of made this offhand comment. I thought it was very interesting. He said he was watching the coverage of the wildfires in Los Angeles, which are really heartbreaking. And he said that CNN's coverage was outstanding. And he wasn't wrong. Because when natural disasters break out, CNN is there. And that's hurricanes, that's wildfires, that's earthquakes. When conflicts erupt, like some of the ones we've heard in this case, CNN's there. And providing all of that content, that really important content's expensive. But it has a really tremendous value. Because we as Americans need to understand what our fellow Americans are going through, if they're in California, or if they're on the Gulf Coast and get hit by a hurricane, or if there's an earthquake in Northern California, or if there's a war in Ukraine. All those things are really valuable. So you've made a decision that CNN's liable, but that doesn't mean that there isn't, a reasonable path forward. So over the next few hours, I hope it doesn't take that long, you're going to hear about CNN's net worth. And you're going to see that the net worth of the company is actually in a subtle decline. You're also going to hear about the headwinds facing the entire media environment. Media is changing really quickly. You're going to hear some of the details about that. CNN still is a valuable asset because of what it does, because of that important information that it delivers. But there are really big challenges that it faces. And you're going to hear that for that reason,
the guy went away twice.
Almost any amount of punitive damages, and even your verdict right now, will serve as a real punishment. And I'm not coming here to tell you that what you all have done should be the end. You've decided that punitive damages are warranted, so I'm not going to tell you that some number isn't warranted. But I am going to tell you that your judgment has an effect.
Okay. Now, the rule of thumb is you violated due process rights of a defendant when the jury won't know this, but the general rule of thumb is the Supreme Court arches its eyebrows when a punitive damage award is more than 10 times the actual damages. Doesn't mean it's going to get thrown out, but if they go more than $50 million, the plaintiff isn't going to get it. So I wonder if the jury knows that. But what you heard there, CNN faces headwinds. The biggest headwind, by the way, my phone number is 1-800-520-1234. And you are welcome to call me up and tell me I face the same headwind with you. Trust is the headwind that CNN faces. Why is Scott Jennings such a hit? And he is. Scott's a great, great, great addition to the CNN lineup. And I have always gotten along with everyone at CNN. Salem Media Group pitched debates with CNN not once, but twice. Stood up and told them I trusted CNN would be fair, and indeed Jake Tapper, Dana Bash, they were fair in the presidential debate that ended Joe Biden's campaign. They were fair. So I trust some people. A lot of them I don't. I'm not going to get, I don't rag. They're not former colleagues. I cooperated with their network. I've never worked for CNN, right? So I've never taken a paycheck from CNN. And I still don't rag on former people with whom I've done good work. And I appreciate that. But the old saying, trust is gained in ounces and lost in pounds, applies. Trust is gained in ounces and lost in pounds. And, I mean, CNN is not my go-to on the fires. Just not. The fires have got that's a local story that is superbly covered by local affiliates of every network, 24/7. And they're not getting much from the LA officials because they're so bad at communicating. But it's not really what one expects from CNN anyway. I mean, Anderson Cooper shows up. He did a good job, talked to Gavin, didn't ask the hard question. Why was there no water? Why was San Ynez empty? Anderson might not have known. But when you lose a defamation case, I know New York Times v. Sullivan. I haven't been sued for defamation. I've been doing this since 1990. 1990. No one has ever said, but then again, I'm not in the business of reckless indifference to the truth or willful falseness. I know the standard. Do not falsely state something, but knowingly state something false. You can make a mistake. We all do. I have often. I've often corrected myself on air. You'll hear that if you become a regular of the Hugh Hewitt Show. But that's not you have to be willfully deceptive or reckless in your disregard of the truth. And the jury found that about CNN. That's a big hit. That's a big slap. That is going to hurt. That's going to sting. And whether or not it changes anything, I don't know. Should Fox change some things after they got a defamation judgment? Everybody should change something if they've gone over the line, because the New York Times v. Sullivan line is the greatest line in the world. We have the freest speech on the planet. I love teaching First Amendment like I'm doing this semester because I like to hold up the United States. We got the freest speech in the world thanks to New York Times v. Sullivan, and I don't want to change it. But boy, you can still bet, you can still cross over it. And in the era of emails and texts that never go away, they proved it in Florida today. The Ted Lasso of talk radio. I'm laughing because the new caller, we've moved, right? This is the penultimate hour of the first week in the new time slot. And I gave the phone number out, 1-800-520-1234. Dwayne is a grizzled veteran of talk radio. Harley is not. Harley might have been nice to you people, but Harley is busy working the video feed and a bunch of other things. Got to get the podcast together, got to put out the YouTube channel. Hope you like and subscribe. Hugh Hewitt. Got to make sure that Hugh Hewitt Show at Facebook is puffed up. Got to do a short for you, all sorts of stuff. So Dwayne today said, I'll answer the phones. Well, it's like a buzzsaw if you're a seminar caller. You're not getting past Dwayne. You're just not. It's hopeless. It's like, in fact, I was listening. Some of the would-be callers felt like Adam Schiff at the end of that, Dwayne. Did you see how Adam Schiff looked at the end of Pam Bondi taking him apart?
And then Adam Schiff goes on MSNBC later and says, Pam Bondi was afraid of my questions. She's afraid. Did Pam Bondi seem afraid of anybody or anything?
No, and I tell you what he's afraid of. He's afraid that every other witness forever will do what she did, which is remind everyone he lied and was censured by the House.
Adam Schiff is the Mr. Irrelevant of the Senate.
He's
the last
get
draft pick.
No respect. He's like Sheldon Whitehouse is so happy he's there because Sheldon Whitehouse was the least respected member of the Senate. I mean, I respect Bernie Sanders. He's crazy, but I respect him. He's been crazy.
When Sheldon Whitehouse can look down his nose at Adam Schiff. That's...
Yeah. Oh, did she destroy that? But now you've given me 4 cuts from Joe Biden, and so I guess I got to play Joe Biden on MSNBC. My old colleague Lawrence O'Donnell. I can't talk about what he did, but here's cut number 3.
You've heard Barack get mad at me when I was a kid all the time. He said, I know, all politics is personal.
Yeah.
Well, it's about understanding what motivates the other guy, other woman, and what their interests are.
That makes no sense. I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, and Barack Obama never said that anyway.
I know. That's what I mean. It makes no sense. Cut number 4.
And look, the other thing, Lawrence, I got a lot of criticism, understandably. We've invested more in red states than blue states.
That's in this book. That's in this report.
Well, for 2 reasons. One, red states really screwed up in terms of the way they handle their economy and the way they handle manufacturing, the way they handle access to supply chains. You know, I remember being out in Iowa, and I remember one of the big issues was that there was a small plant with 300 people, been around for 70 years. My grandfather worked there, I worked there, my son works there, and they had the best education system at the time, and rated the best state education system in the country. And all of a sudden, the kid comes home after he graduates and says, "Mom, I got to leave. There's no job for me here." The factory shut down. Well, guess what? How do you run a country that way? How do you do that?
This makes no sense. I mean, the red state screwed up. I give him a lot of grace because he's obviously infirm and in mental decline. But Lawrence O'Donnell, the red states are in decline. Have you looked at where people are moving? The CHIPS Act, where are they building those? In Texas and Ohio. Red states. Because red states actually don't take all your money, and when there's a natural disaster, they show up with public safety. It gets better. Cut number 5.
It's a little bit like, you may remember, I found myself with the former Pope, who was much more conservative. And he wanted to see me after I spent some time in Poland, because I had said, remember John Rich, John, bread guy. John and I went to Poland, and I came back and said they're gonna leave the Warsaw Pact. They're not gonna be, a year from now. They're not gonna be part of NATO. He said, "Don't write that. You'll ruin your reputation. You'll ruin your reputation. Don't write that." I was confident it was true.
I have no idea who John Rich is, and I don't care. I think he's talking about St. John Paul II the Great, and I because he's talking about Poland, but the former Pope was not more conservative. The former Pope was actually Orthodox. And Joe Biden he's gone. Cut number 6.
I've been dealing since I got elected with the Saudis about, I introduced when the G20 occurred, a proposal as to how to connect everything from India to England.
All right, India to England. There's an ocean. There's an ocean involved. Britain has been going to India since the company, the Right Honorable Company, would sail around the Horn. So they've been connected for a long time by the sea, Mr. President. But okay, let's not be hard on the old guy. No one is going to care after we've got 3 days to go. The big guest today, in fact, I'm going to ask all 3 of the people here. Is Joe Biden going to pardon Jim Biden? Let's start with you, Adam. Is Joe Biden going to pardon Jim Biden?
Yeah, it's likely.
Yep. Harley, is Joe Biden going to pardon Jim Biden?
Yeah, probably.
Dwayne.
100%.
That's what the commentary people were all between 90 and 100%. And I think it's 100%. And I think he's also going to, without any reason, pardon Donald Trump. There's no federal crime for Donald Trump. Jack Smith proved that. Couldn't make a case. We got another phone call that's trying to get through the... Are you just killing them all?
I am not going to set the precedent of having a bad call come in.
I wanted one call in the first week. I don't do many calls, folks. I do guests and breaking news. Breaking news this hour is that CNN has lost a defamation. It's really hard to lose a defamation suit in the media for a report that airs over the air. One report. It's really hard. I know lots of First Amendment lawyers, big firms. They love getting sued because they're going to win. Or the judge will direct a verdict based on New York Times v. Sullivan. We should listen to Axelrod again. Do I have enough time? David Axelrod is counsel to CNN. Oh, we don't have enough time. It's 2.5 minutes. And it's just very sad. So is Kamala Harris. Cut number 2.
And our work is not done. And as you all know me, because we have spent long hours, long days, and months and years together, it is not my nature to go quietly into the night. So don't worry about that.
Got a little bit of the laugh. Let's also do cut number one, the vice president.
I am fully aware that I am the public face of a lot of our work. And so I have the benefit of running into people all over our country who thank me.
Oh, I'll
And
bet
I
you
will
do.
tell you-
Let's do Alejandro Mayorkas, the departing, not Secretary of Homeland Security. Cut number 9.
I'm not sure I'm in a position to agree or disagree with your political conclusion as to what determined the election in November. There are different views having been expressed. I wish that we had more time, and that would enable us to do more, not only in furtherance of our mission, but in the service of the American people. And I don't tend to look back like that. I look forward and see what is ahead and what can be ahead for the benefit of the American people.
You should look backward, Mr. Secretary. Don't let the door hit you. Got a lot of great sponsors, but the equal of any of them, Americans for Prosperity. Love of my heart when it comes to reforming regulatory structures and getting tax cuts done. They announced a big deal this week. They're going to do the Protect Prosperity program. And so I went right to the top. Emily Seidel is the CEO of Americans for Prosperity. Emily, I got to start, though. I was a little surprised to see the president-elect, drive off the road to sideswap AFP yesterday. What was up with that?
Well, Hugh, I know you like to break news on your program. I don't think I'm going to break any news here when I say, we agree with the president in some situations and we disagree in some situations, and that's politics, right? Some of this is to be expected. But look, to the point of the campaign that we just launched, Americans sent a clear message in this last election cycle and sent his administration into Washington, D.C. and a new Congress into Washington, D.C. to fix the economy. And so I think President Trump and AFP can both agree because we both deeply care about delivering on that promise for the American people.
Now, I had Chairman Jason Smith of House Ways and Means on yesterday, and we're worried about the Trump tax cuts not making it into round one. Does Project Prosperity have a preference for one bill or two, or are you just going to go out there and sell people on the risk of not extending them?
We just need to get it done, and we're agnostic on the mechanism to do that. But I will say, to your point, we have to go out there and start talking to people about it, because one of the big concerns that I have is that a lot of people don't even understand what we're facing. The prospect of the potential for a massive tax increase across the country if Congress can't get this done. A lot of people don't know about that. And so we've got to get out there, we've got to make them aware, and then we've got to activate them, because if Congress fails, let's be clear, that is a tax increase for millions and millions of Americans on average of $1,500 per person. And in some states, it's even worse than that. I mean, heading into football championship weekend here, if you're in Ohio, it's over $2,000 of a tax increase. And they're also projecting lost jobs in Ohio to the tune of 26,000 jobs. So this is a serious problem.
Well, you're speaking right to my heart because I'm a Buckeye, and the Buckeyes will win on Monday night. But I hope that you will win with ProtectProsperity.com. To activate people means get them involved. ProtectProsperity.com. What will they do if they go to ProtectProsperity.com, which is what I hope they do?
Well, they're going to have the opportunity to make sure that Congress hears them loud and clear that right now is not the time to raise taxes. We have 40-year record inflation. We just lived through 4 years of Bidenomics. And when you go out and you talk to people at their doorsteps, which is what AFP brings to the table for this campaign, you're able to hear directly from them that there's already a ton of unity around the need to get this done and get this done quickly. 76% of Americans say now is not the time to raise taxes. And they also know that if taxes do go up, if Congress fails to renew these tax cuts, that prices go up. Nobody can afford that right now. And so that's what people have the opportunity to unite their voices together to make sure that Congress receives that message loud and clear.
What I told Chairman Smith, speaking not as a broadcaster or a reporter or a pundit or a law professor, I'm a small business person. This is, the Hugh Hewitt Show. It's my show. I can't afford those tax cuts to go away. I don't know any small business person, but do small businesses know what's looming on January 1 unless they're extended?
This is part of what we're trying to do, is get the word out that we are facing the expiration of these tax cuts, because like I said, a lot of people aren't aware of it. They're also a little bit, I don't know, blasé, if you will, about the chances of getting it done. They think, hey, Republicans won the election, this should be a shoo-in. But you just look at what happened in 2017 when these tax cuts were put in place in the first place. Republicans had a really hard time agreeing on what to put in the package, and it was declared dead multiple times. I mean, they couldn't agree, they didn't have the votes. And so that's why it's so important to run a campaign like this, an unprecedented $20 million campaign, the first and largest outside effort to support the president's agenda here. And we've got to get it done. Americans are united. It's just a question of getting it across the finish line.
ProtectProsperity.com is where you go to get activated. Last word, Emily. What will you ask people to do at ProtectProsperity.com?
We're going to ask them to call their members' offices and make sure that they hear from them. That is the most important thing that a member of Congress can do, is listen to their constituents. And then we're going to have events and rallies across the country. We'd welcome folks coming out and joining us for those as well.
ProtectProsperity.com, $20 million campaign, and they are all in with the president and with the Congress in getting these things extended, all these tax cuts, maybe even broadened. I hope that is the case. Emily, thank you. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the Buckeyes winning on Monday. Since you're focused on Ohio, we're all in. Go Bucks. Beat Notre Dame. Jim Garrity, the indispensable senior political writer at the National Review. Jim, earlier today, Mary Catherine Ham and Vic Mattis on their wonderful podcast, Getting Hammered, referenced the Harper Valley PTA. And they had no idea, and Mary Catherine has gone online to explain to people what it is. Do you know what it is?
First of all, Hugh, good morning. I've been sitting here since our usual time, 8:30 Monday, and just waiting. I don't know if it's your fault, Dwayne's fault.
Dwayne's fault.
Anyway, just okay.
Dwayne's fault.
Secondly, I will dive into the PTA question in a second, but I just want to point out I was listening to you speaking to Emily Seidel. So so Trump said, don't send anybody affiliated with the Koch network, right? That none of those with Trump derangement syndrome. Hugh, what was Pete Hegseth doing from 2012 to 2016?
Working for AFP.
Yeah, working for Converted Veterans for America, another Koch network, organization. Okay, so other than those ones are okay. The ones that Trump likes are okay, but everybody else, they're just the worst.
So Harper Valley PTA?
It's not ringing a bell.
Okay, you are. Mary Catherine was right. She had to explain it. All right, Jim, I got a number of quick questions for you. How impressed are you with California state and local authorities? Not the firefighters. We love them. Not the police. We appreciate them. But L.A. County, state of California, L.A. city officialdom.
I've written about this. I wrote this for like 5 straight days in the Morning Jolt newsletter. And I started feeling maybe a little bit obsessive about it, or just writing about it at great length. But first of all, you could tell the news cycle. The confirmation hearings began. It's not like there were not other things happening. But this is a story that is extremely embarrassing to the entire blue state model of governance. Embarrassing to Newsom. Karen Bass, literally on the other side of the world at an embassy cocktail party when the fire was starting. There were warnings 2 days before she left. And I kept going through. There was no federal, state, or local policy that could have prevented the wildfires from starting entirely. But you add up the reservoir that had been shut down for nearly a year over the tarp on the top being torn. You add up the lack of controlled burns. They've been fighting about this in California for decades. U.S. Forest Service said no controlled burns back in October. You look at the amount of, they need to clear cut areas out. They need to, clear out brush. They have programs for it. They haven't done anywhere nearly in the range that they should.
Jim, it's not brush. It's coastal sage scrub. For 27 years, I've been arguing with environmentalists that we got to mow the equivalent of grass in California, and they won't let you because of California gnatcatchers, et cetera. It's not brush. It's a very rare and important ecosystem, coastal sage scrub, Jim.
They passed the referendum in the state more than a decade ago. They were supposed to build and expand new reservoirs. None of them have been built, and most of them will not. The earliest will be ready at 2027. The later ones will be closer to the late 2030s. I would point out when they were trying to think of a futuristic date for the Blade Runner sequel, they picked 2049.
Huh!
So the last reservoir will be operating for about 14 years in that dystopian hellscape. So at least they have that to look forward to. No, would any of these have been, like there'd still be wildfires if they had made these different decisions here. The 2% budget cut to the firefighters, would that have been a huge cut? No, but if I'm the LA fire chief, you're funding arts programs, you're funding high-speed rail, and my stuff is getting cut. I think they had every right to be outraged. And I was stunned
what you
at
don't
how
get though, Jim.
No.
You don't get the conga line of terrible communicators. I have evacuees living with us, and we're glad to have them. They can stay as long as they have to. The press conferences are endless exercise in telling you nothing. There are literally tens of thousands of homes that are in no danger whatsoever, and they won't let people back in to get they have no power or water, but they're not in danger, and they won't let they've gone full COVID authoritarian out here. Have you covered that?
I have not gotten to, but one last thing I want to add is that the Legislative Analyst Office looked at the state budget for last fiscal year and the current fiscal year and calculated that you add up every program relating to fire, brush abatement, anything related, hardening, better communications, all the stuff related to CAL FIRE comes out to $105 million less this fiscal year than they did the previous year. Gavin Newsom is running around saying that's a lie. And he always says, if you look at how much we were spending when I came into office in 2017, and now it's been an increase. But that's not refuting what was actually the accusation here, which is that you guys have got 100. And by the way, they have like $9 billion in one of the rainy day funds, and then you add up all the rainy day funds they have. Why are you not spending that $105 million you were supposed to have, when you've got money in the rainy day fund?
It's a disaster, and their extraordinary incompetence is on display, but the national news media is turning away. Jim Garrity, let's turn the one thing. My joy moment was Pam Bondi and Adam Schiff. It gave me joy. It's like watching an old Don Rickles roast, just something that makes you laugh. She took him apart. It was like Freddy Krueger goes to the Senate. What'd you think of that?
I thought that was bad. I mean, like Schiff has a brand, and inaccurate accusations are his brand, I suppose. But I just look at the entire process of the hearings. First of all, I had asked, let's just say, liberal columnist at some other publication that I write for that you used to hang around.
The Washington Post. Okay.
And I said, okay, all right. So I asked a couple liberal columnists, like, if you had a magic wand and you could get rid of one nominee, if you could vote down, which one would you do? And by and large, they rejected the premise. They did not want to prioritize, which I think is reflective of what Senate Democrats could have and should have done, which is that, look, you're not going to stop Hegseth and Gabbard and RFK and all these other ones you can't stand. So what you really got to do is you pick one, you focus all your messaging, on that. And the other thing is you have to try to make an argument that's going to persuade Republican senators. And watching the Hegseth hearing, they didn't do any of that, right? The example that I use is that Elon Musk has called for eliminating manned aircraft. He thinks the entire future is drones, and we don't need to be making F-35s. We don't need to be making any more manned fighter jets. Now, my suspicion is that in the very long run, Elon Musk is correct. I don't think, we're ready to go to an all-drone air armada, right now. But ask Hegseth about that. And by the way, Ted Budd, the Republican senator from North Carolina, kind of asked questions along these lines. I don't think Hegseth's answer was anything groundbreaking. He kind of punted on that and said, I want to get under the hood and take a look at all this. But if you'd asked that, Hegseth could have, you either make Hegseth say, no, Elon Musk is wrong, and you put him, in opposition to the guy.
Well, Jim, that would require talent and planning. We're talking about Adam Schiff.
Right, you'd have to think.
Sheldon
you
Whitehouse
have to know about
is
defense
involved.
policy. Now, Hugh, it's the Senate Armed Services Committee. The Democrats on this committee, what are you doing all day?
All day,
No, we're
raising money.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren is raising money. Garrity the Indispensable is with me. Jim Garrity on X. Listen to him on National Reviews podcast, and the editors occasionally, always at the 3 Martini Lunch. Follow him on X and everywhere. I don't know if you're a contributor to CNN, so I'm not going to ask you about the CNN verdict.
They asked me when somebody else is sick, basically. If you see, they're always very nice to be on the show, but generally, if I'm there, it means somebody who's bigger, better, and more important canceled.
Well, professional courtesy demands that I not ask you about that, right. But I can ask you about the other verdict of the day, which is the one being rendered in Israel on the hostage deal. What do you think?
So skeptical. And I feel like there's this weird echo of Jimmy Carter and the Iranian hostages, that a Democratic president who desperately wanted to get this done and was going to do whatever it took. The problem with this or any other ceasefire deal is that Hamas has broken every ceasefire deal they've ever been offered. And so, yeah, anything that gets any hostages home, great. I'll give it a round of applause. But in the end, you have the same people in charge of Hamas, and you have the same people who are saying they're not going anywhere. And so the long-term prospects aren't great. It's set start the stopwatch. How long does it take until Hamas breaks the ceasefire? Because I want to explain this for any Hamas listeners you have, Hugh, in this new time slot. What you do in a ceasefire is right there in the name. You're supposed to cease firing. And so when you start shooting up Jerusalem or any of the other things that Hamas has done there, when you start firing, the other guys are allowed to fire back. It's really on you. So maybe they just need to say it slower. Ceasefire. And if you said that, maybe Hamas will get it then.
I would encourage you to go watch the Haviv Redig-Gur summary in 15 minutes of the angst and anxiety in Israel about this. But last quick exit question. I want to be Rich Lowry here. Percentage chances of Joe Biden pardoning Jim Biden by the time he leaves office?
Oh, good question. Good question. This is his brother.
Commentary podcast. John Podhoretz invented it.
Yeah. I'm going to say 80, but it's not going to come until the morning of the 20th.
Okay, I got to tell you, Jim, they were all 100% or 90 to 100%, so you are the least. Jim Biden doesn't like you. Jim Garrity. Follow him on X at Jim Garrity. Thank you, friend. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe, who you can find at tarzanajoe.com and communicate with. If you're a new listener in this new time slot, tarzanajoe at reagan.com. Rhyme away, Joe.
Well, I thought that I'd introduce myself and what I do to your new afternoon listeners. Poets have a duty, as this poet's often said, to see the world around them from inside another's head, to question all assumptions and to challenge every truth, which helps us do our duty, which is saying sooth. And I attempt each Friday, just within this broadcast hour, to practice my vocation, which is speaking sooth to power. Some topics I'll implore in death. Sometimes my views are cursory. I'll pen an ode to holidays or note an anniversary. I'll celebrate a champion and raise a loving cup. Make some bad predictions. Yeah, you can look those up. This week, my world was burning, and some parts are burning still. At night, our sky was orange from the fires on the hill. We'll have investigations, and results will be the same. Everyone is guilty, and no one is to blame. And then there's the rebuilding through all of this red tape, a tangled root of tentacles from which there's no escape. I've looked at all the issues, and here is my discovery. The Donald should make Kamala the czar of our recovery. Then he and Gavin Newsom will never have to chat. There's nothing in this country more bipartisan than that. I'm serious, by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, that's brilliant, as usual. I want our audience to know that you are a poet for hire. You're a gunslinger with rhymes. And you can, if you have a need for poetry, you write Joe an email, tarzanajoe at reagan.com, or you go to tarzanajoe.com, where this will be posted. I'm serious. And you will find a button that says, need a poem. And this poem will be posted at tarzanajoe.com, I assume, Joe?
In a matter of moments, you.
And are you pleased to move to the afternoons rather than the early morning hours of the dawn?
I'm excited to go wherever the rhymes lead me.
And the rhymes have led you back to our KRLA audience. He is in Tarzana. He is Tarzana Joe, and you can find him at tarzanajoe.com. Don't go anywhere, America. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. I want to thank Adam and Harley and Dwayne for the first 2 hours of this. We're going to go to the Hillsdale Dialogue next. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. And all of our now, a lot of this is new to you folks. All of my hundreds of Hillsdale Dialogues, like all of the thousands of Tarzana Joe poems are collected. The Hillsdale Dialogues are at hughforhillsdale.com. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.hugh. HillsdaleCollegeCruise.com as well. But what I really want you to do, what I really want you to understand, is that you can't miss a minute of the Hugh Hewitt Show every single day on the Salem News Channel and across all these great affiliates.